Hey y'all. All right, as you can see, we are back out here in the garage, and like the title says, top 5 things you can do for your 318 to boost performance. And like it also says in the title, on the cheap. But I would also like to illustrate that this is stuff you can do in your home garage, whether your home garage is, like you've been like me, it's in a kind of a ramshackle place like this, or it's a really nice garage, or it's just your driveway, whatever your garage is, a carport, what have you. Uh, you can do this. Okay, it's not hard. Okay, but I would also like to thank you, all of you, for all of the subscribes, the shares, the likes. Uh, it's really, really, really kind of overwhelming to some degree. I really appreciate it. So thank you so much for all of that. All right. But let me get one other little thing out of the way here, one little commercial. Okay, your area, whatever your area might be like, as far as like noise regulations or laws on that, emissions laws, whatever they might be. You may have no emissions laws, you may have emission laws, and they may not enforce them, or they may be very, very strict with them. I don't know. Okay, that is where you're going to have to do your homework. You're going to have to do a little checking. You're going to have to do a little finding out what you can do in your particular areas. Now, you need to also be aware that these modifications I'm talking about, yeah, it says 318, but it works on just about any LA Mopar. Okay, so it's not one of those things where it's just 318. No, you can do it. These things can be done to pretty much any Mopar small block V8. Now, that being said, those of you with like a Magnum, some of this stuff is going to work, some of this stuff isn't. Some of this stuff is already there. And then those of you with a 340, this stuff is already kind of built into the engine to begin with. So you can think of the 340 as sort of like the LA that got all the good stuff at the right time. Kind of the same thing with the Magnum, really, but maybe not as much so. But anyway, all right. I'm not going to argue the points or all the little details of that. So let's get into it, okay? All right. So, 5 things you need to do to your 318 to improve performance. Number five, number five is going to go backwards. Number five is the exhaust system. Easy to do. Um, a lot of folks, they just take their vehicle off, drop their vehicle off at an exhaust shop, and they come back a couple hours later and it's done. Okay, now there are some mistakes that can be made there. So you need to get with the person doing the exhaust work, and you need to tell them you want a certain size pipe, and you need to use a certain size pipe, and you need to use certain kind of muffler and this sort of stuff, and you want it to come out here. Be detailed with them. They don't mind. Matter of fact, uh, most of them, they kind of like that, because that narrows things down for them, and they can go over with you what they can do and what they can't. Okay. Now, so again, getting back to that emissions regulations, they will be pretty well knowledgeable about that. Most of them will. But if you are getting dual exhaust on your car, truck, van, whatever, with a 318 in it, you do want to at least go with a 2.25 inch size pipe. I wouldn't go any smaller than that. Um, if you want to stick with like a single exhaust, I would at least do a 3-inch pipe and do that as much and as far as you can. Okay. The reason why, you got 8 cylinders going into one pipe, and 8 cylinders going into two pipes. So you do the math there. Dual exhaust is usually the best way to go. If you, but another mistake a lot of people make is the types of mufflers. I'm not really going to get into the different types of mufflers here with you all, but there's a lot of different kinds. Some inexpensive, some not. Some are a little more expensive. But mufflers, as far as like performance is concerned, it's kind of one of those things you get what you pay for. The cheaper mufflers like the turbos and the bullet shaped cherry bomb mufflers, they're going to be really, really cheap, but they're not going to perform all that well. However, if you were looking for less sound, less noise, the turbo muffler is going to be the better way for you to go. But that's it's just gonna reduce flow. The turbo is the turbo muffler, that is. It's going to have reduced flow, whereas the cherry bomb is going to have maybe a little more flow because it's straight through design, but it's got a bunch of louvers inside of it, and it really kind of chokes down everything. When you are buying mufflers, be sure to look at the inside of the inlet and the outlet. Make sure that if you're paying for a 3-inch muffler inlet and outlet, that it is truly 3-inch all the way in there. It's not like 3-inch on there and then it necks down to like 2 1/4 or something like that. Okay, so you also, there's of course, the Flowmaster style mufflers. There's another straight through style muffler that looks similar to a Flowmaster, but it has an angled pipe running through it, perforated angled pipe running through it that attenuates the sound. These are really great too. All of these have been like copied by just about everybody. So, and there's like, if you're like me, you're on a budget, and this whole video is wrapped, is angled towards that, then you're gonna probably shop around and who's got the best deal on, a Flowmaster or whatever, okay, or a Flowmaster style muffler, which those are a chambered muffler. So there you go. So exhaust systems, another thing where you can like kind of go wrong is where they come out. This can have a small effect on performance, sometimes not. But it, lots of times has a bigger effect on sound quality. So if it comes all the way out at the back of the car, it usually doesn't have that big of a effect on the interior. If it comes out like, maybe in front of the rear wheels, it tends to be more in tune with the interior. Okay, so just something you need to know about. Furthermore, okay, so that's exhaust systems for you. All right, now we need to get on to, to the rest of the exhaust system, which would be number 4 would be manifolds or headers. Okay, now I will agree with you 100%. Manifolds, hands down, no argument. Way better when it comes to like maintenance. They're maintenance free or very low maintenance, very, very low maintenance. And leaks are almost unheard of with manifolds most of the time. But when it comes to flow, sometimes they don't do as well. Now, when you're talking about the original log style manifolds, like on a lot of 318s, let me show you an example. Something like this here, maybe, or yeah, this is much more representative. This guy right here. These are early 60s, not early 60s, mid 60s manifolds. This 239 right here really illustrates, log style manifold. I mean, as you can see, this is just, it just dumps right into this and then goes straight and back and out. It's very, very simple. Reason why they do this, compactness, makes it easy to put in a whole lot of different chassis, but also too, it just makes it cheaper to manufacture. Okay, so there you go. Now, can you get extra performance out of these? Yes, if you have a true dual exhaust system running out. If you have like a catback system, yeah. Oh, and that's another thing. Catalytic converters. If you have to have a catalytic converter in your area, try to get like a high flow catalytic converter, okay? Or 2 high flow catalytic converters if you're going dual exhaust. But if you're, you're dead set on you're dead set against headers and you want to go with manifolds, but you want more performance, there is an answer, and it's not very expensive either. And that is the Dodge Magnum exhaust manifolds. I'll tell you what, got one right here. Give you an example. Now this, let me get a light here so you can see what I'm doing, what I'm talking about. This is a perfect example of the Magnum exhaust manifolds. These are really way better flowing than those over there on that 239 right there. Yeah, both of these are 239 cubic inch, but this has a lot more thought put into it. And if you don't want to do headers, then something like this is not a bad option. The Dodge Magnum manifolds. And they're pretty inexpensive, and they're still, I think you can still buy them brand new from like Dormans and people like that. So there you go. Now, that's an excellent way to go because the Magnum manifolds can fit into a lot of different chassis, a lot of different applications with, the 318. And they will clear a lot of the, chassis stuff. So, yeah, Magnum manifolds definitely a good way to go and less expensive. Another way to go would be your typical headers. Now, if you're going to go with headers, sure, you can go with short tubes, and that's going to definitely be better than those log style exhaust manifolds like I showed you a while ago. Now, is it going to be as good as like a long tube? No. No. Definitely not. So I wouldn't even think about saying that the shorty headers are a good replacement for a long tube. It's been proven time and again that the long tubes, they just gain power everywhere. So long tube headers, those are the top notch as far as flow and performance is concerned, and you'll see some gains there. So there you go, exhaust system. Oh, one other little thing I want to put to rest here. For a long time, there's been a long-standing myth that if you go too big on your exhaust pipe size, you will kill bottom end torque. Not really. It's hearsay. It's whole wives' tales. It's been pretty well proven. You can look it up for yourself. There's a lot of dyno information and a lot of dyno testing that proves that is all just garbage. So, yeah, I wouldn't even think about going with a smaller size pipe. I mean, if you do lose any torque on the bottom end, it's going to be very, very minimal, very minor amount. So I wouldn't even worry about it. Minuscule, nothing to even, maybe onesies and twosies, stuff like that. I wouldn't even think about it. Nothing to worry about. So, let's get on to number 3. Okay, induction system, the induction side. And I would also like to point out this right here. If you're going to do any of these modifications to your Mopars, be sure to get yourself plenty of information. Okay? Well, it just doesn't want to cooperate, does it? Okay. Of course, there's the factory service manuals. Those are always going to be fantastic. If you can't do those, then there's the Chiltons. Those are going to be pretty good. Then there's the specialty manuals too that will go into detail and tell you more about all the different kinds of things you need to do to, like your cylinder heads, your intake, what kind of intake you need to run, what kind of headers, carburetors, okay, camshafts, modifications to the oiling system, yada 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 yada. Lots of information there in books like these. And of course, you got your stock, you even got your Haynes. Haynes, if you don't have nothing, Haynes is a damn good place to start. I would not turn away a Haynes if I don't have a manual on that car. Okay, that's just the truth of it. So, induction system. Okay, Now we're going to start with the intake manifold because, as you can see, I know, scary, isn't it? 318 cubic inches is breathing through that tiny little opening, okay? Just this. That's incredible, okay? It's incredible this thing was rated at 230 horsepower, breathing through this, okay? At one time, yeah, they were rating these at 230 horsepower. I think the performance was much closer. The performance mark was probably much closer to like 150. But as you can see, tiny little amount that it's having to breathe through. So, you know, two little tiny barrels down there that are maybe that big around. I mean, and I've in some of my previous videos on the little Carter BBD 2 barrels and all the ones that have come along, like the Holly 2280 and all of those. If you're looking for performance, there's maybe a few little things you can do, but it's not going to gain you much. Okay, I wouldn't really go very far in trying to gain performance with one of those tiny little 2 barrel carburetors. It's just you're not going to get very far. Okay, all right. So, which means the manifold. You got to take care of the manifold. Now, there's a lot of aluminum intake manifolds out there on the market for the LA small block V8s. Now, let's put something to rest real quick. The port mismatch. Another myth kind of floating around. A lot of people say, oh, it's a real thing, and then some other people say it isn't. Go to 318 will run. He has shown it's not that big a deal. It really doesn't hurt performance that much, if at all. Again, it's one of those onesies or twosie things. The gains you're going to be gaining from running a 360 intake manifold over, a 318 manifold is going to be big. So, but back over here, we can see. All right, you can see right here this Offenhauser. All right, this is an Offenhauser 360 equal flow. This is 5 inches tall right there. Now, I've got like these 360 4-barrel cast iron spread bore manifolds, and I can tell you that these guys, they're a little taller. Okay, they're probably like 5 1/8 or 5 1/4 inches tall. And I can also tell you, yes, they are set up for the thermoquad, the spread bore manifold. But I can also tell you this: they're also fantastic in flow. Most serious high performance engine builders of Mopar small blocks, they will tell you this is a great piece right here. Yeah, it's heavy as lead. I'm not going to argue that, but this is a great manifold to start with because you will gain some serious performance with that. Okay, especially over this guy. Okay, and like the aluminum manifold, you probably won't gain much going from the cast iron to the aluminum, if you gain anything at all. So sorry about that, but this Mopar single plane torquer, Edelbrock torquer 340 is 4 3/4 inches tall. So now, why is it important, the height? Because that height determines the amount of plenum here. Okay, so the larger this plenum can be, lots of times there's more gains for performance. Now, but there is limitations to that too. Okay, so lots of times you'll see, like, the pro stock cars, especially way back in the day, they'd have the 2 4-barrels on the tunnel ram intake. Well, that was an overgrowth of the development of the very long ram tubes you saw on the early 60s 300 letter series cars. So there's a lot of science going on there. But intake manifolds, the old cast iron 4-barrel, Not too bad. Okay. Do some homework. Okay. And you'll find out there's some really good stuff out there. And really not for very much money either. So something to think about. Now, so yeah, 340 or 360, those are 360 intake manifolds. They're going to gain you way more performance um, than the old two barrel, and I wouldn't even probably gain you and any aluminum intake, any aluminum four barrel will gain you more performance than the two barrel. Okay, so but you know this channel is all about doing it for less. So you know that's definitely a way I would go. Okay, on the 318. As a matter of fact, that's the way I'm going to go on that $50 318. So next would be carburetors. Okay, now like we saw with the little $50 318 was tiny little two barrel. Yeah, you're only looking at maybe 200 CFMs max, maybe. I mean, it can't flow a hell of a lot. I mean, these things are just, you know, they're very flow limited. But they were set up that way to begin with. They weren't set up to be, you know, performance monsters. They were set up to be, you know, high. They weren't set up to be any sort of performance carburetor at all, really. They were set up to be something that is, you know, daily driver, economy, that kind of thing, which leads to the economy, the idea of the 318 being an economy engine. But that kind of falls apart when you look at, you know, the internals of a lot of 318s, and they came with forged crankshafts and forged connecting rods. And you're like, I thought this was an economy engine. But you know, to be fair, yeah, they had, you know, small valve heads and low compression and, you know, tiny little two barrel carburetor. But that was also for longevity too. Um, but so, you know, just something to think about. But, you know, now when you go to like the four barrel intake, of course, you want to go to like a four barrel carb. Of course, there's plenty out there on the market. There's Edelbrock, there's Holley, uh, and there's Demon. Uh, there's even some copies and knockoffs of the Holley that are even made by the Holley company itself. So those are some definitely worth looking into. Um, but if just a good general rule of thumb, if you want to bolt on a carburetor and go, you don't want to tune it, you don't want to like mess with it all that much. I would probably not. I would probably go not much bigger than like 650 CFMs. However, now an engine will only use what it needs. So you can bolt on a big 800 CFM carburetor, you know, and it's only going to use what it needs. Okay, so it's been proven. So it's just that, you know, you're breathing through a little two barrel like this, and then you go to, you know, a 600 CFM four barrel, you know, or a 650 or maybe even a 750 four barrel. Yeah, there's going to be some significant improvements there. That's why carburetors are number two on this. Okay, so intakes are number three, carburetors number two. Yeah, you see big gains there. Okay, all right. So now that we've talked about carburetors, and but if you do go with a bigger carburetor, please do jet it down accordingly. Okay, so that it's not running too rich. Neat little trick: just get yourself an OBD2, not OBD2. Sorry, my apologies. Get yourself a O2 sensor, wideband O2 sensor, and a oxygen fuel meter. You know, to read all of that. Tells you how rich or lean you're running. Uh, and that's really, really super helpful to tune that carburetor. Okay, next is number one is going to be ignition systems. Now, ignition systems, you might be saying to yourself, wait a minute, what do you mean ignition systems? What's the big deal? Well, I'll tell you this. I bought my Ram Charger, you know, and on the drive home from North Carolina, I found out the timing was set at 12 degrees. It wouldn't get out of its own way. 60, it would barely get above 60 miles an hour on flat, level ground. I am not joking. Not joking. Borrowed a timing light, bumped the timing up to 14 degrees. 2 degrees, mind you. 2 degrees. And all of a sudden, that little 318 in that Ram Charger went from being meek and mild and barely being able to do anything to all of a sudden being an absolute lion. Okay, so that's why I'm saying your ignition system is super important. Timing is super important. Okay, now every engine, I'm not going to sit here and tell you what your engine will need. Every engine is going to be a little bit different, especially depending on camshafts and everything like that. But your ignition system is very, very important. Now, so when you get an ignition system, like, like an MSD or something like that, yeah, they're going to have all kinds of adjustability and everything like that. But if that's like high end, and we're not high end here, we're inexpensive. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make sure, get yourself a timing light, make sure your ignition timing is correct. Make sure there's no problems there. Okay? Make sure also too that your ignition, like all the plug wires are in great shape. Make sure the spark plugs aren't worn out. Of course, make sure that, all the wiring connections to all your ignition system components are in good shape. Okay? Electronic ignition, Mopar, that little ballast resistor can be a big problem, so make sure that it's in good shape. Now, if you're also too, you're going to want to make sure your simple stuff, stupid stuff like battery terminals, battery is charged up, and battery cables aren't garbage. Grounds are good and clean. You wouldn't believe how many times I've, somebody be building some hot rod car and you pop the hood and there's like the battery terminals are like corroded over and they're loose and they're held on with like a pair of vice grips and crap like that. Just get that stuff fixed, okay? I know you want to build the car, you want to drive it. Hey, I'm right there with you, but let's do it right, okay? All right, so it's not that hard. Okay, so yeah, and all of these rules apply, in the ignition system. All of these rules apply whether points, electronic, or you've even lucked up and got yourself an MSD or Mallory or Axel or whatever. Okay, all of these will apply. Furthermore, if you are even more serious, there is a bonus sixth thing you can do for your small block LA318, and that is the camshaft. Now, I didn't list that with the rest of this stuff because I didn't put it in that, because I didn't want to create a problem there, and it's a little harder to do. Okay, this is more for like the newbies. All right, now, and also too, lots of times people can choose the wrong camshaft, and then you're tearing the entire, you're taking the entire front end off the engine. That is another reason why I didn't include this. It does take some disassembly. So, and for some folks, that can be detrimental. That's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go that far. But when you do change out your camshaft, big gains can be had. So, what you're going to want to do is when you're looking at camshafts, look in the camshaft catalog, okay? And I will show you exactly what I'm talking about.